Ladies and gentlemen, let's be honest, relationships, dating, love, even casual interactions between men and women are layered, complex, and often misunderstood. Yet, beneath all the confusion lies a simple truth. Most men don't truly understand how women respond, emotionally, psychologically, and behaviorally. You see, getting what you want from a woman isn't about manipulation, domination, or flashy tricks. It's about connection. It's about mastering presence, understanding feminine psychology, and showing up in ways that make a woman want to give you what you're asking for. So today, I'm going to walk you through the powerful keys to get what you want from women 99% of the time. Not by force, not by games, but by showing up as the man she chooses to say yes to. Ready? Let's begin. Confidence is your currency, and not just in how you walk or talk, but in how you exist in a room, how you make eye contact without flinching, how your tone remains steady even in silence, how you breathe without rushing, and how you remain grounded in your own presence without need to over-explain, over-perform, or overcompensate, because confidence is not about the volume of your voice, but the weight of your energy, not about bragging rights or domination, but about inner stability and calm conviction that speaks louder than any words you could ever say, because when a man walks into a room with quiet confidence, without desperation, without needing to be liked or approved of, women notice it instantly, not because he's trying to be noticed, but because his aura commands attention without effort, without strategy, without gimmicks, and in that space, he becomes the center without trying to be the center. He becomes the one women want to understand, to engage, to respond to, because women, whether consciously or subconsciously, are wired to feel into energy, not just observe behavior, and the energy of a man who is at peace with himself, who isn't trying to win points or fake charm or gain acceptance through tactics, is more seductive than any pickup line or rehearsed script, because confidence, real confidence, is rooted in emotional self-reliance. It's the ability to stay calm when you're not getting what you want, to keep your composure when she tests your boundaries, to not flinch when she says no, and to smile even when she pulls back, because you know your worth is not on trial, and you do not need to prove your value with every interaction. And this kind of presence is magnetic to a woman because it makes her feel safe to lean in, not because you force her, but because you give her space to come toward you on her own terms while you remain still, self-assured, and composed in who you are and what you bring, because confidence is also restraint. It's knowing when not to talk, when not to react, when not to seek validation, and when not to compromise your frame just to gain temporary attention, because a woman can sense immediately if you are grounded or if you are bluffing, if you are whole or if you're wearing a mask, and once she senses that your sense of self doesn't waver based on her approval, her tone changes, her energy softens, her walls begin to lower, not because you tried to bypass them, but because your presence made her feel emotionally safe, and emotional safety, not charm, not looks, not status, is what unlocks her openness. And when you cultivate true, embodied confidence, you no longer beg for connection or force outcomes, because you understand that attraction flows naturally when you are anchored in your own truth, your own values, your own stillness. And when you move through the world with this level of assurance, women don't just listen to you, they feel you. And when a woman feels you in a way that resonates deeply, she begins to respond to you without needing to be convinced, persuaded, or pressured, because you have already done the one thing most men never do. You've made her feel that she can relax, that she can exhale, that she can drop the performance, because your confidence gave her permission to stop guarding, and in that moment, everything shifts in your favor, not because you took it, but because you created the emotional space where she offered it. Freely speak to her emotions, not her logic, because while logic may win debates, emotions win hearts and decisions. And when you're dealing with a woman, what moves her, what stays with her, what makes her say yes when everything around her says no, is never the data, the facts, or the bullet points, but the feeling she gets when you speak in a way that touches her emotional core, because a woman will forget what you said, she may even forget what you did, but she will never forget how you made her feel. And that is the key to getting what you want from her consistently, because if you approach her with cold facts or try to reason her into agreement, if you pile on evidence and rational explanations thinking you can convince her like an academic paper, you're already missing the point, because the feminine responds to feeling, not force, and when you talk about what you want or need from her, you need to paint it in a frame that evokes emotion, curiosity, excitement, or even desire. For example, instead of saying something like, "I think we should go out Friday," say, "I've been thinking about us spending Friday night somewhere that feels like our own little escape from the world." And suddenly, she's not just considering your idea, she's emotionally stepping into that scene with you, imagining it, feeling it, experiencing it on a level that logic can't reach, because now you've invited her into a story. And stories are the emotional language women are deeply attuned to. And the truth is that every woman is a storyteller inside, wired to connect meaning and emotion to almost everything she does. And the more you engage that part of her, the more she opens up, the more she feels a sense of closeness with you, and the more she associates you with those positive emotional cues. And when that happens, her resistance drops, her logic takes a backseat, and her willingness to follow your lead grows naturally. And this doesn't mean you manipulate emotions. It means you honor them by communicating in a way that shows you understand how she experiences the world. And when you speak her language, not just through your words, but through your tone, your timing, your vibe, your pauses, your eye contact, all of that becomes part of the emotional rhythm she tunes into. And you'd be surprised how often what you say matters less than how you say it, because you could ask her for the same thing in two different ways, one dry and logical, the other emotionally textured, and get two completely different responses. And that's not because she's irrational or moody. It's because the feminine mind processes connection first, logic second, and if you bypass her emotional world, you lose her interest, her attention, and eventually her cooperation. But if you master the art of emotional communication, even in simple daily conversations, if you speak in a way that feels like warmth, like safety, like intimacy, she starts to associate you with comfort and openness, and suddenly, what you want becomes something she wants to give, because it feels good to say yes to someone who makes her feel understood and emotionally engaged. And this becomes even more powerful when you learn how to listen with emotion too, when you validate what she feels without always trying to solve it, when you mirror her emotions back with empathy, when you say, "That must have been so frustrating," or "You deserve to feel appreciated." Instead of just giving advice, you show her that you're not just hearing words, you're feeling with her. And in a world where most men try to outsmart women or fix their feelings, the man who simply speaks and listens to her emotional truth becomes the one she trusts, the one she opens up to, the one she says yes to again and again, because in that space, her guard comes down, not because you forced it, but because your emotional intelligence unlocked it effortlessly. Make her feel understood, because the moment a woman senses that you truly get her, not just hear her words, but feel what behind them, she shifts, she opens, she starts leaning in instead of pulling away, because one of the deepest emotional needs of a woman is to be seen, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, energetically. And when you become the man who doesn't interrupt, who doesn't rush to correct her or minimize what she's sharing, you create a space where she feels emotionally safe. And that safety is the foundation of her willingness to give, to trust, to follow, to say yes without hesitation, because women don't give themselves fully to men who only understand them on the surface. They give themselves to the ones who slow down enough to make her feel like her emotions matter, her opinions carry weight, and her presence is valued. And the power in making a woman feel understood doesn't lie in agreeing with everything she says or losing your voice just to make her comfortable. It lies in your ability to hold space for her, to mirror her experience, to say things like, "I hear you," "That makes sense," or "Tell me more about that." Because that shows that you're not trying to win or solve, you're trying to connect. And connection is the root from which influence grows, because when a woman feels connected, her walls drop, her defenses soften, and what once felt like resistance turns into curiosity, even desire. And this is where most men miss the mark, not because they lack charm or looks, but because they focus too much on being impressive and too little on being present. And presence is the most attractive quality you can give a woman when she's expressing herself, because in that presence she begins to trust that you're not just there to get something from her, but to share something with her. And when that shift happens, her yes becomes natural, not forced, because it's based on emotional alignment, not pressure. And the irony is, the more understood a woman feels, the more available she becomes, not just emotionally, but physically, mentally, even sexually, because understanding her creates safety, and safety allows her to surrender in ways she never will with a man who makes her feel judged, rushed, or dismissed. And it all begins with the small things: how you look at her when she's speaking, how you pause instead of jumping in, how you reflect what she's said without trying to fix it, and how you ask deeper questions that show you're not just waiting for your turn to speak, but genuinely interested in what's behind her words. And it's also in how you validate her without patronizing her, how you acknowledge her perspective even when you don't agree, how you respect her emotional flow without labeling her dramatic or sensitive, because the minute she feels labeled is the minute she begins to shut down, to withdraw, to disconnect from your influence, and that's where you lose the power of her trust. So instead, you stay calm, stay curious, stay open, and as you do that consistently, she starts to associate you with emotional clarity, with calmness, with depth, and over time that connection becomes the very thing that makes her want to give you what you ask for, because you're no longer just a man with a request, you're a man who understands her world, and when you understand her world, she wants to invite you into it fully, she wants to cooperate, she wants to support, she wants to please, not because she has to, but because she genuinely feels that you care. When a woman feels cared for on that emotional level, she will show up for you in ways logic could never unlock, because feeling understood is not a luxury to her. It's a need, and when you meet that need without ego, without agenda, just presence, you become unforgettable. Be unapologetically clear. Because clarity is power, and women respond to certainty with trust, with attraction, and with willingness. And while many men believe they need to sugarcoat, hint, or dance around their desires to avoid rejection or discomfort, the truth is that every time you dilute your message, you confuse her. And confusion creates distance, not closeness, because a woman can't follow a man who doesn't know where he's going. She can't trust a message wrapped in hesitation or self-doubt. And even if your words are kind or respectful, if they lack direction, they lack impact, because clarity isn't just about what you say, it's about the energy behind what you say. It's about saying, "I want this," without flinching, "I like you," without waiting to see how she reacts, "I'd like us to explore this further," without needing her to validate it first. And when you speak like that, when you are clear in your intentions, your boundaries, your values, she may not always agree, but she will respect you. And that respect is the foundation for all positive female responses, because when a woman knows exactly where you stand, she can make a choice without fear or confusion. She doesn't have to guess what you want, doesn't have to decode your actions, doesn't have to overanalyze your mixed signals, because you've created a space where she can meet you directly and honestly. And that emotional clarity is rare and refreshing in a world where so many men play games, fear confrontation, or try to manipulate their way into connection. But a woman doesn't want to be manipulated. She wants to be led, not controlled, but led with confidence and emotional maturity. And that leadership begins with you being clear on what you want and who you are, and communicating that with calm conviction. And this doesn't mean you have to be aggressive or dominating. It means you speak as someone who knows his value, someone who has nothing to prove but everything to share, and that kind of clarity removes pressure, because it gives her the emotional freedom to say yes or no without drama. And the more you practice being clear without apologizing for your wants, the more she feels safe in your presence, because she knows there are no hidden agendas, no emotional traps, no second guessing, and that safety is what allows her to step into deeper intimacy with you, not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. And the beauty of clarity is that it doesn't just get you answers. It builds attraction, because decisiveness is attractive, Direction is attractive, purpose is attractive, and when you say what you mean and mean what you say, she feels that strength and starts to respond to it on a deeper level, even if she doesn't show it right away, because women are drawn to men who don't waver when things are uncertain, who don't shrink when things get emotional, who don't run when feelings arise, and that steadiness is born from being clear with yourself first, so you can be clear with her. And this also means setting boundaries when needed, saying no when something doesn't serve you, speaking up when something matters, and doing it without guilt or shame, because the more you own your truth, the more she sees you as a man who can be trusted, who doesn't bend just to be liked, who doesn't perform just to be accepted, and in that strength she finds her own desire to open, to give, to follow, not because you forced her, but because your clarity made her feel emotionally secure, and emotional security is what allows a woman to move freely toward what you're asking for, to say yes not from fear or obligation, but from alignment and choice, and that yes is powerful because it's real, and it all starts with you being unapologetically, undeniably clear. Make it a win because when a woman sees herself in what you want, when she feels that your desires include her joy, her peace, her pleasure, her values, she becomes far more willing to say yes, not because she's being persuaded, but because she genuinely feels the outcome benefits her too, and that's the difference between asking for something and inviting her into something. Because women are not resistant to giving. They're resistant to giving where they don't feel emotionally safe or personally valued, and if you make the interaction or the request all about you, what you need, what you expect, without framing it in a way that considers her world, her feelings, her vision, she'll pull away, not out of defiance but out of disconnection, because she doesn't feel included in the equation. But when you speak in a way that shows her this benefits both of you, when your language shifts from "I want this" to "imagine how amazing this could feel for us," her entire response changes, because now you're not asking her to sacrifice, you're asking her to join. And this is where emotional intelligence becomes essential, because it's not about manipulating or sugarcoating your request. It's about creating a mutual experience where both people win, where what you want aligns with what makes her feel seen and fulfilled. And the truth is, when a woman feels like saying yes also honors her own emotional needs, she doesn't need to be convinced. She becomes excited to engage, to offer, to lean in, because you've created a frame of shared value and mutual desire, and that frame takes the pressure off the interaction, because she knows that your intention isn't to take from her, but to co-create something that feels good for both of you, whether it's something as small as choosing what to do for the evening, or something as intimate as deepening emotional or physical connection between you. Framing it as a win. Win makes her feel included, respected, and emotionally prioritized. And women are highly sensitive to whether they are being asked or expected to meet someone else's needs at the cost of their own. So if your energy suggests that it's one-sided, if your tone implies that her no will be met with resistance or guilt, she will naturally protect herself, and in that protection, she'll say no not just to the request, but to the connection itself. But when you show her that your desire is not a demand but an invitation, when your tone and body language say, "I want this with you, not just from you," she feels emotionally safe to explore the idea, because there's no emotional trap waiting behind her answer. And that freedom is what unlocks her desire to give and share and meet your needs willingly, because she knows her experience matters in your world, and that experience must be woven into your requests, your planning, your interactions, so that your communication is never just about what you want, but about how it can bring value and happiness to her as well. And this doesn't mean you become overly accommodating or abandon your own desires. It means you become strategic in how you present them, so that the outcome you're seeking becomes a shared vision, not a one-man mission. And when a woman feels she is part of that shared vision, her yes is stronger, her effort is deeper, her energy is more enthusiastic, because women give freely to what they feel emotionally invested in. And it's your job as a man to present your needs, your plans, your requests in a way that speaks to her desires too, because when you do that consistently, she stops feeling like she has to choose between herself and you, and instead starts choosing both of you together over and over again. And That's when getting what you want becomes effortless, because it no longer feels like a transaction. It feels like a shared experience where both people win without force, without games, and without emotional strain know when to walk away, because the deepest form of confidence a man can carry is the ability to let go of what no longer serves him without bitterness, without begging, without losing his center. And this applies even more when dealing with women, because the moment a woman senses that you are willing to stay at any cost, even the cost of your dignity, your boundaries, or your peace, you lose her respect, you lose your power, and eventually you lose yourself, because women are instinctively drawn to strength. Not the strength of muscles or aggression, but the strength of emotional detachment when necessary, the strength of having options and choosing not to cling to what isn't aligned. And when you stay too long in a situation where your needs are not met, where your value is not recognized, or where your voice is not heard, you teach her to ignore your presence. You teach her to stop taking you seriously, and you slowly become invisible in her world. But when you can calmly walk away, not to punish her but to protect your peace, not to manipulate but to preserve your self-worth, you show her that you are a man who values himself more than any temporary validation. And that kind of energy is magnetic, because it communicates that your life will go on without her cooperation. And ironically, the moment a woman realizes you are not afraid to leave is often the moment she begins to reconsider everything, not because you forced her hand, but because you reminded her through action, not words, that your time, energy, and presence are not available to anyone who doesn't honor them. And that message hits deeper than any emotional argument ever could, because actions speak directly to the emotional center of a woman's mind, and inaction, silence, withdrawal when done with grounded intention, not ego, communicates strength far more than pleading ever will. And yes, there will be moments where walking away is uncomfortable, where it feels like loss, where the silence weighs heavier than expected. But it is in that discomfort that you reclaim your emotional independence. And emotional independence is what makes a woman see you as a leader, as a man with direction, as someone whose path is not tied to her mood or her approval. And this clarity creates a gravitational pull, because now you are not trying to chase. You are attracting by standing in your truth. And it's not about walking away from every disagreement or challenge. It's about recognizing when the energy is no longer reciprocal, when the dynamic has become imbalanced, when you are doing all the giving while she is doing all the deciding, and choosing in that moment not to shrink or fight harder, but to rise above it with silence, with distance, with dignity, because your silence says, I don't need to prove anything. Your absence says, I'm not here to convince you of my worth. And your distance says, I love myself enough to choose peace over chaos. And this behavior doesn't just affect the moment. It leaves a lasting imprint in her memory. It separates you from a crowd of men who tolerate mistreatment just to stay close. And it reminds her that you are a man who can't be controlled by emotional games. And whether she returns or not becomes irrelevant, because the decision to walk away wasn't about her. It was about honoring your own standards, your own capacity for self-respect. And once you master this ability, you become unshakable, not because you win every woman, but because you refuse to lose yourself over any woman. And from that place of grounded emotional clarity, you attract women who are ready to meet you at your level, not because they have to, but because they genuinely want to. And that kind of alignment only becomes possible when you show the world and yourself that your presence is earned, not begged for. Getting what you want from women 99% of the time isn't about control. It's about alignment. It's about standing in your masculine truth, owning your voice, and leading with emotional intelligence. Be confident, speak with emotion, make her feel seen, be clear, create mutual wins, and most importantly, respect yourself enough to let go when it's not for you. When you embody these things, not just speak them, you won't need to ask twice. The answer will already be yes, thank you.